Now this next lesson is one of my favorites and probably one of the most useful lessons that you're going to get for a very long time on the subject of blues chords, because what we're about to do is take these chords, these big blocky E-shaped and A-shaped chords, and turn them into these nice small little chords that work really, really great in a band, and they're really, really easy to play. And since most of the time we're either playing with a jam track or with a band, these are the chords that we go to. So, as I've said, you generally speaking won't use those big blocky bar chords. So even if you're having trouble with them, that's okay, because you're just going to use them to help you find the little chords that we're about to learn. Okay, so if we go back to say the regular old big A7 in the E shape. Now remember, I call it the E shape because if you move it up from its open position, it started life as an E, and now it has the root on the 6th string still. So you can call it a root on the 6th string chord or an E-shaped chord. Okay, well, once the band kicks in, we have bass, we might have keys, there's all kinds of things that might be going on. We, generally speaking, want to not play the lowest 2 strings. We just play the top 4, okay? And in fact, we don't even need that much, as we'll get to here in just a minute. We generally just play those top 4 notes. So notice how much easier it is to play when all I have is a half bar at the 5th fret. Basically, I'm borrowing from the D on the 4th string, the G on the 4th string, up to the high A. So it's a bar, half bar, then I add my middle finger, and that's it. Okay? And you remember like a D9 chord that we learned in the last lesson. Well, remember I mentioned you really don't need that root? You really don't need it. You really should leave it out, in fact, most of the time. So that allows you to use either your 3rd finger or your middle finger or 2 fingers, or however you want to finger those top 3 notes that can sometimes be a challenge. You don't really have to worry about it. Now, it's going to look probably to you like my middle finger is playing the root on the 5th string, but it's not. If I pluck it by itself, you hear nothing. It's there to help me find the root note. I sort of leave it in position, but I don't actually push down with it. It just reminds me of where my root note is. Because this much of the chord doesn't have a root in it anywhere. There's a 3rd, and a flat 7th, and a 9th, and a 5th. But without that root, without the band, you wouldn't know really what chord it was. It would sound kind of awkward. But once the band comes in, and they'll play that D root for you, it'll make perfect sense. And of course, we can move it up to an E9 as well. Right? So, here's a really, really cool thing, okay? You really don't even need all of this. You really need the 3rd and the 4th strings. These are the flat 7th and the 3rd of the chord. So on my A, I really only need the G here at the 5th string, 5th fret of the 4th string, and the C sharp that's on the 6th fret of the 3rd string. That's really all I have to have. The 5th and root on those top 2 strings, really not necessary most of the time, okay? At least for what we call comping, which is when we're playing along, playing rhythm with a band. We call that comping a lot, okay? So, excuse me, for comping, I really don't need anything but those 2 notes. Now, if you watch those 2 notes very carefully as I go to D9, all they do is this. There's the D9, but notice those 2 notes did nothing but move down 1 fret. Now it's a D9. If I fill in the rest, it makes a D9. But for my purposes, I'm just going to slide down a half a step and get my 4 chord. It's really just that simple. So there's my 1 chord. There's my 4 chord. Done. It's very, very easy. And of course, for my 5 chord, I just move it up 1 fret. And again, if you can fill in the rest around it, then it might help to see it. But that's the E9, D9, A9. They're all right there. This is the 7th and the 3rd of the chord. This is the 3rd and the 7th of the chord. So they just invert. So this is a really, really, really handy thing. And in all seriousness, I use this when I play with a band. If we're playing a 4-hour night, I'm going to use this 3.5 out of those 4 hours. Whenever somebody's singing, whenever there's another soloist going on, I use these little 2-note chords all over the place, and they are powerful and useful and easy. 3 of my favorite things, okay? So let me show you one other cool little trick right here, which is a lot of times we'll pick this stuff, but what I like to do is I like to pluck them like that. So what I do is I use my pick for the lower string, the 4th string note, and my middle finger on my right hand for the 3rd string note. So I get kind of this, it's very quick and short. It's almost like a piano or like a horn section. It's a really cool mechanism to just get a nice short pop out of the note instead of something that might actually be a little bit too loud, a little bit too aggressive, depending on the situation. Okay? Now, let's take what we just did and let's move it into how we're going to use it for this upcoming example. First of all, this upcoming example is in B flat. Why did I just show you all this stuff in A and then make the example in B flat? Well, because you got to get good at moving the stuff around. All right, so we were in A, we just move it up to B flat. There you go. There's my B flat 7. No problem. I went from A7 to B flat 7. I got rid of the bottom 2 strings. There we go. If I get rid of the top 2 as well, I got 2 notes in the middle. There's my E flat 9. Again, if I get rid of the bottom and I get rid of the top, that's all we got. B flat, E flat, B flat, F. Okay? Now rhythmically, we're looking at something like this. A 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and quick change 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. Now that's if I do it with a pick. If I do it plucked, it basically sounds the same. You just have to be a little bit more on the ball because your right hand can't keep time for you. It'll go something like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 to the E, B flat, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and back to B flat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and to the F and 1 and 2 and the biggest move we have, 2 frets down to the E flat, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? Now, you can pluck, you can strum. It doesn't really matter. Okay? It's just as effective to strum it as it is to pluck it. So really you just have to decide. And to be honest, I think you should learn it both ways. There may be situations where you like the plucked sound better because it can be a little bit more subdued. And then there's going to be things where maybe it's a little bit of a harder shuffle and it's just a little more grooving and you want a little bit more aggressive sound, so you use the pick. Okay? Either way, the chords don't change. The 12-bar blues pattern's still there. Using little chords instead of the full versions of the chords is the order of the day. So nothing changes except how you articulate it with the right hand. Okay? So now that you got an idea of how this all goes, let's do a play-along version.